Hi, I'm Kenny Rice, and thanks for tuning in to this as we get ready for episode 7 of the Horse Racing Show. We taped this show in advance of Santa Anita making the announcement that they have canceled racing and training indefinitely as they continue to evaluate the safety of its main track. This happened after another horse, sadly, the 21st in 10 weeks, had to be humanely destroyed because of an injury related to the track. What's even compounding the frustration of all this is that no one has a definitive answer as exactly what's going on. They've had experts out there looking at the track, people that know about soil samples, people that know about how a track is supposed to function. There's speculation, of course, because they've had an inordinate amount of rain in Southern California this time of year, around 11 inches or so. Possibly that would have something to do with it. That would make sense. What it is doing right now is compounding everything on the road to the Kentucky Derby, because the two top horses, the consensus at least of everyone, the two top horses, Game Winner and Improbable, both trained by Bob Baffert, were supposed to run this weekend in the San Felipe at Santa Anita. That race has been postponed. As you know, time is precious and scheduling is of essence as you get ready for the Kentucky Derby, now less than 2 months away. What he'll do then, we don't know. If the horses will stay in Southern California, try to find another area out there to run in, maybe go to Arkansas or go to New York or to Florida. That's to be determined. But it's a situation that basically is unprecedented. I cannot remember anything like this. So that's the situation at Santa Anita. Some of the things you may hear in the show were taped again before we found out that Santa Anita had closed racing and training for the rest of this week. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're with us and delighted to have a good friend of mine. He's one of my favorite people all time to work with. You see him on NBC. You'll see him now and are seeing him now on Fox as well. He is a host. He is a reporter extraordinary. He is Laffit Pincay III, who joins us. Hello, Laffit.
You stole my line, Kenny. Kenny Rice, one of my favorite people on the planet. It's great to be on the show.
Gosh, we're like Donnie and Marie now, aren't we? It's like a love fest here.
That's right. It goes back several years now.
You know, and I've known you. I don't want to be that guy that said, I remember, but I remember being around your dad, the legendary jockey, and there, I remember when you were, I'd say a kid, you were a teenager, I think, when we first met.
It's been about that long.
Yeah.
It's been about that long. I think one of the first conversations we had, I was covering a Preakness for HRTV. It may have been maybe Street Sense Curlin right around that time, and you were back by the Stakes Barn, and there's Kenny Rice, and you had your NBC mic flag, and we, I had not had a real conversation with you at the time, and you walked up and said hello and shook hands, and we talked for about 20 minutes, and it was so appreciative from somebody, very new to the game and aspiring to get into broadcasting and covering events the magnitude of the events you were covering. And I think I've told you that in private, but I've always appreciated that.
Well, thank you. And that's very nice of you. It's a rare moment that I was that nice. You know how surly I usually am when I'm working.
I'm trying to dispel the myth of what a bad guy you are off camera as best as I possibly can.
Well, you're doing a good job. And I want to see, it seems like it would be a natural fit for you that this is what you would go into. Obviously, the son of the all-time winningest jockey. But was it that simple that this was going to be a natural fit, that you'd go into covering horse racing in some capacity?
Horse racing, it's like, that was a line from Godfather 3 in the mob. It's like once you think you're out, it drags you back in. You wind up back in horse racing one way or the other, and we love it, right?
Yeah.
No, my first job in News 12 in the Bronx was covering mainstream sports. In the early 2000s, it was basketball, baseball, football. There was so much saturated coverage of the Mets and the Yankees and the New York Rangers and the Knicks, Giants, Jets. We focused on a lot of high school and college stuff, and spent a lot of time at Hofstra and Manhattan College and Fordham. So yeah, that was the plan initially. But like I said, it's hard to get out of this industry, but it's an absolute blast to cover, as you know.
Yeah, and did your dad give you any advice about approaching jockeys or just talking about horse racing in general? Because your dad's a fascinating man, in addition to obviously his obvious accomplishments.
Indirectly, just in conversations, Kenny, that we had. And for him, it was such a struggle because of his weight. He wasn't designed to be a jockey. He jammed a square peg into a round hole for decades. He wasn't built to carry, 117 pounds or whatever it was, living on a few hundred calories a day. And that was the toughest thing for him, was as good as he was at his job and as much as he won, he didn't really enjoy it, Kenny. He couldn't win 4 races, including the stakes race, and then go out and celebrate like we do after a show. Go out and have a steak and a drink and whatever. He'd be 5, 6, 7 pounds heavy the next day, and that would do that. So just from the sacrifice behind the scenes and watching him that closely and watching racing on television together, he would point out certain things, that this jockey did this really well, or that jockey just made a mistake. Certain observations that I think made it just a lot easier for me when it came time to talk to a rider after a big race, and some of the questions and some of the observations that seemed a little bit more poignant that I may not have picked up on otherwise.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I want to say this about your dad. I remember the first time I saw him, I went back in the jocks room and he just has the pants on. I think Laffit Pincay Jr. had something like 3%, 4% body fat. He couldn't lose weight. He was just solid muscle.
It's insane.
I mean, it's amazing how well built he is.
You've seen the exercise riders in the morning. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all built, big backs, big arms from harnessing these race horses. And so working horses became an issue because the more he exercised, galloped, and worked horses in the morning, or just worked horses, I should say, he would start to put on more muscle and expend more energy. And in the afternoon, not only would he be a little bit, started getting heavier from the added exercise, the equivalent of lifting weights, he was zapped. He was tired. So it was a real tricky thing for him because, as you know, for most riders, if you want to keep riding to get horses, no matter how established you are, you're expected to show up in the morning and work horses. It was trickier for him. The more time he spent there in the mornings, that he knew it was going to pay for it later on in the afternoon.
We have similar problem carrying that microphone all the way over on the walkover at the Derby. I feel much stronger by the time I get to the
paddock. It's a lot heavier than it looks.
It's a lot heavier.
It's a tough job, but, somebody's got to do it.
Talking with Laffit Pincay III of NBC and now Fox. And I want to mention the Derby because we all we go our separate ways on our reporting at the Derby. We'll catch up sometimes back there near the same barn or something, but you have assignments, I have assignments, Eddie Olczyk, whatever. We're all over the board. Donna Brothers is here and all over the place. But then we all congregate for the walkover. That's like the first time I see you in about 3 or 4 hours. First time I see everybody, we're gathered there to get over for the walkover. And I still tell people that's one of my favorite things is, even though there's 160-some thousand people at Churchill Downs for the Derby, once you start that walkover around the track and you start hearing the people and the applause is swelling for the horses and the trainers, that's still one of my favorite things in sports.
It's organized chaos, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And you see the women dressed to the nines, and the outfit and the hat that they took God knows how many weeks, months, putting together and picking out. And there they are walking on, for example, last year on a sloppy racetrack with their heels in their hands, walking barefoot. It's such a special moment. And what would you estimate? Because I think it's supposed to be, 17 armbands or something per horse?
Yeah. Yes.
On average, to me, it feels like there's 40, 45 people per horse.
It does.
It's a mob.
It does. And, you made a good point about the organized chaos, because I think people watching at home, and maybe sometimes the people we work with, they think it's like, post positions like 1, 2, 3, 4, they're going to come in order. They come out however they come out. And it's easy to lose a trainer if you're not really on top of it. You can't lose focus, even when some of the 50 people that are hanging over there, you're not even sure how they're associated with the horse wants to talk to you. You got to still focus on your guy, because your guy can slip away pretty fast.
If you can find him, there's that sense, that panic, that rapid heartbeat when the horses start walking over and you haven't found your guy.
Yeah.
Even if it's been confirmed or not. Did you interview Keith DeSormo with Exaggerator?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
So this is what I remember about that show. He has Exaggerator. He's the second choice in the Derby that particular year behind Nyquist. And if memory serves, he was like the last guy. Forget about trainer, like the last guy who arrived in that gauntlet to make the walkover. And just the chatter I was hearing in my earpiece from the truck, I must have heard, has Kenny found Keith yet? 100 times in a 7-8 minute period.
Yeah, that was a long, it was probably about 5-7 minute range. It seemed like it was about an hour and a half because I'm sitting there and one of the stewards came up to me. They organized over there and they're checking the horses and making sure everybody's walking out. And one of them came up to me and said, "Are you walking with the Sormo?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where is he?" I said, "Great question. I wish I knew." And as you know,
stepped out of the shed. That's Keith. That's just Keith.
He came out. I said, "Where have you been?" He said, "You miss me?" And then he slaps me on the back, and he's just so laid back. And that was his first. I believe that was his first Derby as a trainer.
I think it was.
And and like you say, he's got the second choice, a lot of attention, more attention that's been on him as a trainer than ever. And he is so laid back. He's in the afternoon at Louisiana Downs. He's in the second race. It doesn't matter.
And he knows what he's doing. And
he does.
Ran a winning race that day. Yeah, but that the walkover, and I think you get much more of a candid response. That these trainers are asked the same questions Derby week over and over and over, and it almost becomes robotic with some of their responses in terms of predictability, Kenny. But in that walkover, in the money, when they're walking over with their horse, whether it's Todd Pletcher, who's done it 1,000 times, or Keith DeSormo on that afternoon doing it his first time, they get a little wide-eyed. And seeing the crowd of 150, 60, 70,000, however many it is, it's one of the first questions I asked Todd a couple of years ago. Like, how do you compare? He's done this 40 some odd times. How do you compare this to the first? And he says it still gets me.
Yeah,
it still has that same impact. It's a pretty amazing moment.
It really is, and that's I think that's one of the best things about horse racing to me is that Derby walkover. Because I think that's why the Derby attracts the crowd it does as far as the TV audience. You kind of get caught up in the moment. It's like before kickoff of a Super Bowl, there's a moment there. You go, this is something. And and you've covered a lot of other sports too. And now with Fox, in addition to the NBC coverage, with Fox, you're back on the road all the time. You're doing horse racing. You're doing a lot of horse racing in this new deal that they have, which I don't see any downside at all for horse racing because horse racing people are always saying, how come we aren't on TV more often? Well, you are now.
The viewer wins, Kenny. The horse racing fan wins with so much content being generated, whether it's online or the network presence between NBC and Fox now. Yeah, the viewer's the winner. I'm super fortunate of the flexibility being shown from NBC, being allowed to work for both entities. And, I've only done one of the Fox shows. I'll be in Tampa Bay. First time ever, by the way, for the Tampa Bay Derby this Saturday, the Rebel the following week for Fox. I'll plan on spending the entire summer at Saratoga while still maintaining all of my responsibilities and NBC and all the jobs for NBC between the next NBC broadcast, the Santa Anita Derby. That's always part of a triple crown cast with the Bluegrass and the Wood, obviously the Triple Crown, and then the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series, Blink, and it's fall racing, and we're back at Santa Anita getting ready for another Breeders' Cup. And
of course, the big thing in all of it for all of us is the perks, air miles and hotel points.
Naturally,
that's what it's all about.
Naturally,
we have too many of them already, don't we? So you got a lot of air miles. Well, I really sat in a plane. I really did.
Maybe the day that it starts to feel like work, I would start thinking about wanting to do something else. It's an absolute. It's fun covering a sport that you absolutely love. All of the characters in thoroughbred racing, from the breeders, the owners, the trainers, the jockeys, and so much lead up and build up. As you know, Kenny, a horse racing broadcast. It's in a 1 hour show. In some cases, you have, if you cover two races, well, there's 4 minutes of action. But otherwise, for something like a Kentucky Derby, so much hype and build up and months of preparation and all of it for 2 minutes. There's a at risk of sounding very cliche, there's a reason they call it the most exciting 2 minutes of sports.
No, you're right. And I think that telling stories, which you do so well, is a big part of it. My contention is, look, you got to get them out to the track first. You have to get people interested in the sport first, have some idea. You can't just say, hey, go out there and let's start betting, because for most people it's like playing a slot machine. If you haven't been around the races, just to go out. I remember my first time, because I didn't grow up in the sport. First time I go out there, I don't know what this forum's all about, this racing forum. Okay, I'm watching the races. You got to kind of get to know people and get interested enough to come back, as you do with any sport. That's why you can't explain the infield fly rule until you see baseball. You just have to watch it, and then you get it.
You couldn't be more right in terms of introducing somebody who's been to the racetrack to the sport. You can try and market the racehorses. Unfortunately, our superstars, the shelf life is limited. By the time someone who doesn't necessarily follow horse racing on a weekly basis learns who Justify is, well, he just won a Kentucky Derby. You get him for 2 more starts, and then they're retired, and then you're back to zero as an industry trying to reintroduce a new superstar, the next phenom, to the audience. You don't have Tom Brady playing for 20 years. So I think that the approach, and part of the reason why more network coverage is so vital and so important, and something that we do together, Kenny, at NBC, and certainly part of the Fox coverage, is exposing an audience to here's the experience. Here's what a day at the racetrack feels like.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, the next time I take somebody to the racetrack for a first time on a big day, and they say they don't want to come back or didn't have a good time, we'll be the first.
Yeah.
I think that's the proper approach. Just hand somebody a racing form. It can be very intimidating. It's hieroglyphs. But don't worry about the betting. Let's just have a fun day at the racetrack. And most people, it's when can we come back? When's the next big day?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what it should be. Fun. Sports should be fun, and you know that as one of the best baseball minds out there that's not covering baseball all the time. Laffit and I actually have been to a Dodgers game together, and
that's right.
And who gave something away that night? What was that? I forgot. Whenever we were there, was it something like bobblehead night or something?
Something.
That's what
Bring
they always.
your friend to the ballpark for free night is what it was.
Maybe that was it. It was something like that.
So, I'm having a real issue though with the Dodgers right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So here's a story for your listeners. Maybe you didn't catch it during the Travers coverage last year. Kenny is interviewing mattress Jim McIngvale, and at the end of the interview proceeds to show off Mattress Mac's World Series Houston Astros ring. Right?
Yeah, that was I'm embarrassed now. I'm ducking. You can't see me.
I had to look at that.
Yeah.
I had to look at that as a lifelong Dodger fan. Like, I'm already over the Red Sox World Series last year because they were the better team. The Astro lost. That one will stick with me for a long time. And I don't know. What do Bryce Harper, 13 years, Kenny, $330 million. Didn't bother. The Dodgers didn't get their hands on Harper. The one that I thought Arenado was where they'd spend the big money next year. And I was surprised and very disappointed when he re-signed with Colorado.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the Mattress Mac Big Diamond thing there, by the way. That ring was gigantic, though. I'm telling you, I don't think any of the players had a ring that big, and he was really proud of it. And we were talking about the benevolent gesture he'd made to the city of Houston, after the flood and all. And yes, and I knew my friend Laffit Pincay III, as avid a Dodger fan as I know, and we both know John T-Bone Shelby, who played center field on the '88 championship team. Yes. Yeah, and there I was.
Everybody likes to hit me with these Dodger blow darts. We had Breeders' Cup day after the Dodgers lost in Game 7 to the Astros.
Yeah, I remember. We were out in we were in Del Mar. Yeah,
we're in Del Mar, and we're covering the Breeders. Here comes the Breeders' Cup Sprint. I don't remember who it was. They were showing Imperial Hint, who's this described as a tiny rocket ship. He's like this really small racehorse, but he's really fast and really talented. And somebody says he's kind of the Jose Altuve of thoroughbred racing. I'm like, really? It hasn't been 24 hours. Too soon.
I didn't speak about that. I never brought that up. It was almost a year later at the Travers last year before I ever even broached the subject of that Astros-Dodgers World Series, my friend. In your presence,
you're clear.
at least.
You're off the hit list. I like you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have a favorite Dodger player of all time?
All time.
Yeah, it's pretty
Big Fernando Valenzuela fan growing up.
Yeah.
It was a short period of time, but I was watching on television and still remember how exciting it was watching Kirk Gibson take Dennis Eckersley with that backdoor slider in Game 1 of the '88 World Series. So even though he wasn't there a long time, Kirk Gibson will always hold a special place in all of Dodger fans' hearts. Oral Hershiser.
Yeah.
And now I'm a huge Clayton Kershaw fan, and I think going back to that 17 World Series, watching him give up a 3-run lead and a 4-run lead in Game 5, that one kind of made it personal. As big as a Kershaw fan as I am.
Yeah, that was tough to watch, and I rooted for them because of your friendship and because I'm John Shelby. I was rooting for the Dodgers, even though John's no longer with the organization, well removed. But yeah, that was a tough one. I hate to see that the best guys don't get their moment. You know, they can be great all season. It's kind of like so many good jockeys that, you know, they don't ever get that moment of a Triple Crown or a Breeders' Cup race that people remember, people being the general public. You know, they win everything in the world somewhere else, but they don't win a Triple Crown or they don't win a Breeders' Cup race, or at least big enough that people know.
That's what, you know, I'm sure that's what, you know, diehard Miami Dolphin, Dan Marino fans must feel like.
Yeah.
I think back to the 13 Derby we covered, Kenny, and Shug McGaughey winning with Orb. And here he is back in the mix, just having won with Code of Honor in the Fountain of Youth. But what I remember about that Derby is how popular of a Derby win it was, and how everybody, even the Dallas Stewarts who had Golden Soul run second that year, and Fletcher was revolutionary. Even the other trainers who saddled horses who competed and lost could not have been happier for Shug McGaughey. And who knows, maybe we're going down that road again.
Well, we mentioned Code of Honor. Big week coming up this March 9th weekend, and you mentioned the races all over, coast-to-coast races. Are there horses right now that you think, if you had to pick like a top 5 to look at, even though I know, you know, we can say anything, and who knows, if everybody stays healthy, I have to couch everything. Everybody stays healthy. Here are 5 or 6 horses I think could go and be factors in the Derby.
Yeah, how?
I would say Baffert's like, 3 probably.
It's almost like, one more time?
I'd say Baffert's got probably 3 of the top 7.
How, you know, Roadster has that, speaking of Miami Dolphins, that Larry Zonka, just pin your ears and run angry kind of approach. He just runs angry out there. So impressive in his most recent race at Santa Anita. How can you fault an undefeated 2-year-old champion in a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner and game winner and Improbable? We watched him Breeders' Cup weekend.
Right.
It wasn't a Breeders' Cup race, but Breeders' Cup weekend at Churchill Downs. You know, Improbable likes the track, and it's kind of the point where, like, I realized the Patriots lost the Super Bowl to the Eagles the year before last, but I can only imagine, and I'm not a big sports gambler, but if you invest or wager a significant amount of money against the Patriots, against Belichick, against Brady in a playoff game, in a Super Bowl game, and you lose, like, how?
Yeah.
You have to feel a little silly afterwards, right?
That's right. That's right.
So,
I went against the proven. You know, the track record does sort of mean something.
Right. And at this stage, just betting against Baffert almost feels silly. So it's understandable. While I don't know that we've seen some flashy 2-year-olds win Breeders' Cup races, crown champions, getting ready for their 3-year-old run. I've seen, and I don't know that game winner to me visually is any more impressive than a Vindication or some of these other really terrific 2-year-olds, regardless of what they did during their 3-year-old season. But because it's Baffert, there seems to be an added level of respect for game winner and for Improbable and his upside in Justify stall at Santa Anita.
This is when I really start getting into it. A little bit of like March Madness horse style is when, this weekend start coming up and we get closer now to Florida Derby, Santa Anita Derbies, Bluegrass Stakes, those kind of races.
It feels like if somebody hits the clock and the countdown starts, for me, it's always right around Fountain of Youth. I think that's part of a gift that the Pegasus has given us in horse racing is it spares us from a lot of mindless Kentucky Derby chatter in January. Because you know as well as I do, these trainers are more patient now. You're going to see the better 3-year-olds maybe in February. In some cases now, like Baffert is with game winner improbable in March. That's been the emphasis for trainers now is a rest after a fall campaign and bringing back a horse with it's 2 preps and then the Derby with some of the bigger outfits seems like the approach that's most often taken now. So, but now after the Fountain of Youth and all the hype surrounding Hidden Scroll, and I'm very interested to see what happens with him moving forward. But now it gets serious, and it's like a semi-final round of these prep races with the Tampa Bay Derby, the Gotham in New York, and the San Felipe. Which, by the way, real quick, Hidden Scroll brings up another conversation because it seems as though because Justify won the Derby in his 4th career start, Kenny, and because he won the Triple Crown in his 6th career start, all of a sudden experience doesn't, it's like it doesn't matter.
No.
And I understand that it might mean a little bit less. If nobody has a lot of experience, yeah, it's going to mean a little bit less. I'm wondering if by the end of the year, Hidden Scroll becomes the yin to Justify's yang. Mm-hmm. When somebody says experience does not matter. And they say, well, look at, Hidden Scroll didn't have any experience, and he went into the Fountain of Youth in his 2nd start, and his first try against graded stakes horses, and first time going long, and first time on fast ground, and he kind of got his bell rung a little bit. And, but I'm interested to see what direction Hidden Scroll goes in, because I will tell you, they don't want to expose their horses. At least they used to tell you. Don't want to do too much too soon. If they have a bad experience, mentally it could set them back. That's a really tough race Hidden Scroll is coming out of. I mean, he got caught up in that blistering pace duel. It could have, is there any shell shock? We'll see. I'm very interested to see what goes on with him.
That's a great point, and like you say, that's been the biggest change to me is the training methods over the last. Well, I mean, going back, I remember like Barbaro. You can't, Big Brown. You can't be doing this and winning. Animal Kingdom. He's a grass horse. I mean, it's you just got to forget it now. I mean, kind of almost look at how they're training up to it. I do, and it really has thrown things. I think for. Well, not for a loop, but it's made it more interesting than saying, well, if you remember the old days, if you didn't have 4 or 5 races, what's wrong with your horse? What's the horse isn't ready.
That was as a 2-year-old, if a 2-year-old didn't run 7, 8, 9, well, what's wrong with him?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going back a long time. A little bit more recently, the Florida Derby, many might not remember that Florida Derby was not a final prep race. It was in that, let's call it the semifinal round.
Yeah.
Like we have coming up this weekend. Horses would run in the Florida Derby and then go to the Bluegrass or the Wood Memorial. It used to be 3 weeks out from the Kentucky Derby.
That's right.
The Bluegrass used to be 9. It was on a Thursday.
I remember when it was on a Thursday. That's the first one I ever saw. I was in college and I went to it. It was on a Thursday. I cut a class early and went out to Keeneland.
It's Thursday. In between 9 days in between the Bluegrass and the Derby. So I think that the Stronach Group, and at the time Magna, they wanted their, they had the Santa Anita Derby out west, but they wanted the Florida Derby to be a final prep, a marquee event before the Kentucky Derby. 5 weeks out, 35 days. That's no man's land.
Yeah,
because you don't want to squeeze in another prep in between 35 days and the Derby. Like, how is this possibly? The Florida Derby trainer is going to avoid it because it's in what we consider to be no man's land. And as good as Barbaro was. And you remember Barbaro, he went from the Holy Bull and he didn't run in the Fountain of Youth.
That's right.
Said, no, we're just going to run in the Florida Derby, 5 weeks Kentucky Derby. We thought he was insane.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he did it and did it so impressively, all of a sudden, maybe it does work. And now over the last, 15 or so years, the Florida Derby and that 5-week window has been so incredibly productive.
Laffit Pincay, great friend. Thank you for your time. I'll be watching this weekend on Fox, and I will see you soon at the Derby.
Looking forward to it, Kenny. I'm sorry we couldn't Skype. I was hoping to show you some cool tattoos. I'm sorry, cool, what was it, scars that Gary Stevens showed you?
Yeah, Gary was.
But, maybe next time.
Well, I was hoping, I'd see the scars, I thought maybe you'd have some dogs or animals running in your backyard. That's always fun. We always like to mix it up. Next time, go to Gary's house and Skype us, okay?
Yeah, going back to a topic we touched on earlier. Organized chaos.
I love it. Much like this show. If you thank you for watching it, you can tell we just do it. And we don't have that shoe company sponsoring. I just gave them a plug, and they don't even sponsor us.
Maybe they will now.
Yeah. Laffit, thanks again, my friend.
Anytime, Kenny. Thanks so much.
All right. The very talented Laffit Pincay III from NBC and Fox. And stay with us. More of the Horse Racing Show right after this.